Hey everyone, welcome to the Script and Style Show, the web show where we talk about web development and the people that make it happen. I'm Todd Gardner from Track.js JavaScript Error Monitoring, and my co-host David Walsh, creator of the popular blog davidwalsh.name. How's it going today, David?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. You were coming back from Toronto the other day, huh?
I did. I was in the Toronto office, Mozilla office, I should say, all the end of last week and through the weekend, mentoring some students, which was pretty exciting. Not so exciting, however, was my flight back. My flight back was no good.
What happened?
Oh boy. So for no apparent reason,
they took you to Newark.
That would have been worse. For no apparent reason, we just sat on the runway for like 45 minutes for my first flight. And I only had an hour layover for my quick flight from Chicago back home, which is literally like 20 minutes in the air. So I get to Chicago with like 10 minutes to spare. And of course, everybody takes forever to get their carry-on bags off. So I had to sprint from E-Gate through D-Gate. And if you've ever been to the Chicago airport, you have to go down this escalator, and there's like this long hallway with lights flashing, and I just sprint all the way through that, and I've got like 3 minutes. And I look up at the sign as I'm running up the stairs. And granted, I am sweating like profusely because I'm wearing my sweatpants. I'm wearing just my comfortable stuff. And I see a sign that says gates C1 through C17. And the first thing that hits me is, please tell me that C2 is the close side. Please tell me I don't have to run through an entire. Nope. So I had to run down 20 gates worth of space. And I get there, again, I'm like sweating, I'm out of breath. And they did eventually get me on my flight, but I don't think what they did was exactly street legal. I got home though. I was not mentally prepared for someone to say, you're going to have to go tomorrow. Like, it just wouldn't have worked.
So, you could have gotten a car and just driven it.
It's like a 3-hour drive, man. It was like, I'm already tired, dude. I want my 20-minute flight and get GTFO. Anyways, today we have a guest, Todd.
We do. We have a good friend of yours, I believe.
Hey!
Uber celebrity Chris Coyier is joining us this week.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Sorry about your trip, man. You should, just never leave the house.
I get so worked up about travel. That's the problem. But anyways, I'm super excited to have Chris. Did you want to introduce him, Todd?
Yeah, so Chris, if you're not familiar, is the founder of the CSS Tricks blog, which I guarantee you have landed on some frantic Google searching trying to figure out how to do. Because I think I end up on his blog at least once a month for something that I'm trying to figure out.
I probably end up on his blog more than I end up on my own. Well, that's another thing.
He's also the co-founder of CodePen, which you've probably used to show off some sweet thing you're working on. And he's the co-host of the Shop Talk Show, which has over 330 episodes. So thank you very much for coming on the show with us today, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you covered all the big three for me. It was a number of years back where I was kind of had more projects than that, and I kind of
simplified.
I simplified down a little bit. Not that it was ever too bad, but I was doing lots of side projects and working for other people, so, and I know both you fellas do that, so I know how hard it is to keep up with stuff like this while you're juggling somebody else's job and family stuff and trying to figure out what the heck to do with your life. It's hard to do. So I'm lucky that I do these three things, but that's all I do. I keep it pretty tight.
Yeah, you're also an author. I forgot to even add that to the list. You've been everywhere. You're like the Ryan Seacrest of web development.
Oh, right. It's easy. You just take your blog posts and turn them into a book. That's the easy part. No, it's not that easy, but it's
content.
Yeah. But for real, yeah. I mean, if anybody out there is interested in doing that kind of thing, I couldn't recommend that strategy more. Don't write it all at once. Don't just sit down and write a book. Blog it, then write it.
Totally. So let's jump in that Wayback Machine back when before you even had all of these projects. you and I come from a similar background-ish in that we were both Wisconsin boys at one point, starting our first jobs in the web industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, right across town.
But
you
let's
were at,
go.
like, Kinko's or something, weren't you? Was it literally Kinko's?
Shots fired. No,
I think you hit a sore spot.
I was at a small web shop. Doesn't Kinko's do? No, that they do print, right? What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Clinky Cleaners.
There was some kind of like little print shop thing that somebody worked for. Maybe it wasn't you. But...
Totally. No, that I did. I did start off at a small print shop. But jumping back before that, we always have people introduce themselves from their origin story of how they got into tech, why they decided to get into the whole web development gig. What's your origin story?
Sure, I can do mine. I mean, sometimes I think of it as like, this is, not that it's a bad interview question, but not terribly interesting, only because I'm like, I didn't do anything exceptional. I didn't overcome any adversity. I just like to point out at the beginning of what I talk about this, that I come from a place of like pretty solid helping of privilege, like my parents weren't rich, but they bought me a computer early on, and they nothing but encouraged me playing around with that computer. And then I went to schools that were super well funded, and I was driven there every day, and I took to computers at school, and my teachers helped me learn things and encouraged every single thing that I ever did. Like, never did I face, and I never had to overcome anything. I was always just like, computers are fun, boop, 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 and followed that trajectory forever, and then just ended up at this career, So I think back on it, and I'm like, it just wasn't that hard. It just felt like a very natural path, and if anybody has the opportunity to follow that same path, of course, I'd highly encourage it. I mean, I love my job. I love getting to work with computers all day, and this, I feel like we get to like solve puzzles all day. It's like somehow that became our job. It's very like mentally stimulating and fascinating, all the little puzzle pieces we get to put together, not only as developers, because of course we do, but when we get to do a little design work, those are different types of puzzles. And when we get to try to solve business problems, those are other types of puzzles, and fitting on how our lives fit together is a different puzzle. It's just fun.
Yeah. The whole problem solving aspect is one of the things that got me into development as well. Although sometimes I'd like to hand over some puzzles for someone else to solve.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but I would think that'd be an early tell. If somebody's like, I think I might get into tech, and then the first few puzzles come your way, was that just entirely frustrating and hellish and not enjoyable even when you solve the problem? Or when you solve the problem, did you feel like, yeah, that was awesome? Like, give me another one, And if your feeling was give me another one, I think you're well suited for this.
Absolutely. So we met a long time ago. As you mentioned, I was at a Kinko's. But, we were both at sort of smaller agency jobs, and we just decided we wanted to start a blog. I think that's
independently of each other. It's not like we had a secret meeting where we decided blogging was the answer,
Right. So I think we met early on.
There's not a secret society of Madison-based bloggers.
I don't think so.
There wasn't at the time. There might be now. No. But so jumping back to that time, do you remember the reason why you started a blog? Like, how did you get into it? What inspired you to do that?
Kind of. I mean, I remember it as like even before CSS Tricks, which is the big one I'm known for now, and definitely like, that's my primary output, I guess, as a site owner, even though I have a few others as well. I don't know if you remember this or if I've told this story before or what, but I know I've told it before, but your listeners may not have heard it, is that it was kind of like in the air a little bit. It was this like people making money blogging. There was guys like Darren Rose at ProBlogger.net or whatever, and he'd post articles like, I have, because what he always talked about is that he had this camera review blog where he would like post. He was like a bit of a amateur photographer, and he would post reviews of of cameras and then load them up with affiliate links and display ads and stuff. And the guy made hand over fist cash doing it. And you're like, all you do is write some crap on your WordPress blog and you make all kinds of money. Like, I don't even need to make Darren Rose money. I need to make like $100 a month. And that would be like rad. Because it was early on in our career, you know, we're single and young and dumb, and beer money would be fine, you know. So I get to play around with my computer and possibly make beer money. Absolutely, I'm in, you know. So my first crack at this was like, you know, let's do the SEO angle. Like Darren Rose is making money because the title of his blog posts are, you know, Canon 500D SLR review. So, and you know, there was just less blog. It became obvious that like, if you just have boring titles like that are obvious SEO fodder, it's going to work for you, especially if you do it for years and years and actually do a good job and actually get out there and try to get people to link to you and do all that stuff. It worked for him. It can work for me. Let's see. What kind of expertise do I have? Well, I have a little bit, you know, I screw around with design and stuff. And I had a friend who was working for tech support for Adobe, or like tech support for a third-party company that Adobe hired to do that. And he, you know, so all day long he answers the phone, is like, oh, my PDF won't open. What do I do? And it turned out, you know, that's that's Adobe Acrobat error 19BL. So we'd publish we threw up a WordPress blog called like how to fix Adobe Acrobat error 19BL. And then and actually have some information on there, what could be wrong and what you should do and crap. Just thinking like, we'll do that. We'll throw some Google ads in the sidebar. Maybe we'll make $100 a month. And I think we probably did make about $100 a month, high end, you know, but it was fun just to even get to that point. There's so much work you got to do to even get there. You got to buy a domain name. You got to, at the time it was just, we're like, I don't know, I guess WordPress is the thing you use, right? Install WordPress and put a design around the site and sign up for a Google AdWords account and put those on the side of it and stuff. This was very much not me like, I want to give back to the world. This was definitely like, I want to make some easy money kind of thing. But at the time, but we made like 8 of them, you know, we thought more sites, the better, you know. The ending of that story was that Adobe was just like, you can't have websites called Adobe Photoshop. That's not acceptable. But they were cool about it. It was just like, I think they paid us to take them down. You know, like, what'd you spend on it? You know, like, oh, $200. Here's $200. Take it down. Like, okay.
And that's probably like, yeah, we made $200.
Yeah, or something. You know, I think by that time we were kind of done with it anyway. Because one of them that I spun up, because I was just spinning up sites right and left, because it was fun to do anyway, was CSS Tricks. Because I was like, the creation of these, I'm learning so much about how to spin up a site and how to design a site. And I love the CSS part of it. That's like the fun part where you get to pick the colors and change out the images and all that. And so CSS Tricks was kind of a meta blog of like what I'm learning about web design as I'm doing that. And I'm basically got my first job just like David. You know, he's working on a small print shop. I got a job at a small print shop as well. Doing web stuff, you know, they did 95% print stuff, but their customers at the time were more and more asking for websites. You know, remember this is 1905 or whatever when we started. And print design was still the predominant thing. Of course, there was websites, but they weren't if you were worked at an agency, you did 90% print work and 10% web work. That's just what it was like then. But their customers were like, I think we should have a website, you know? And we're like, sure, we can do that. You know, agencies around the world were saying that, being like, sure, not knowing what they were getting into. And we got like, I remember, you know, I still think fondly of this. We got like, we had a client, the Rick Wilcox Magic Theater in the Wisconsin Dells. I mean, Midwesterners will recognize the Wisconsin Dells as being a tourist mecca. And they're still there doing magic, but they wanted a website. But previously, all we did for them was like billboards and brochures and all this print stuff. But they wanted not only a website, but to sell tickets on this website. That was my first job I got at this thing. So, and all I had done is tossed up WordPress on sites before. So what the heck do I know about any of this? And I, you know, pulled it off because it was like, dude, we're going to hire you to build this website for these magicians. And you better be able to do it, basically, you know, as well as maintain a few sites that my predecessor there had started up, but had no idea what he was doing either. So it was trial by fire. We have a couple of websites already up that you need to maintain. Yeah, you want to make this magician site. We want to do this catalog site. And it was I've never worked harder in my life for probably $28,000 a year or whatever, you know. Just nuts. And so I liked it. I loved my boss then. It was a company of 3 people. I felt like I had made it, sitting in a chair all day, drinking, you know, big gulp Mountain Dews or whatever the crap. I didn't have any vacation time. I didn't make any money, but I got to program all day, and that felt tremendous. And of course I was learning so much then that I held on to CSS Tricks and still blogged the whole time through all that. And it was so satisfying. I'm sure, you know, maybe the first year was a little rough, but you know what, I bet David remembers what it was like back then. You write a good one, maybe you get linked up in Smashing Magazine and you're like, nice, right. You know, or somebody else links to you and you're watching your analytics every day. I can't even tell you the last time I looked at my analytics. I don't care anymore, you know. But back then, everything you care, you know, somebody leaves a comment and you're like, nice, you know, you're just into it. This idea of things feel very different these days. I feel like these days you get a comment and you're like, God, I hope it's not some prick, you know. Right. Chances are it is, you know.
I remember when I first met my future mother-in-law, and my wife had mentioned something about me having a website, and she was like, oh, how many people look at it? And it was 150 people. And that was like the biggest thing in the world at the time. So I do remember those early days. One thing that I can sort of boast about with it is that, Todd, do you remember Dig and Dig Nation, like back in those days?
I absolutely remember Dig Nation. Yeah.
So I made the homepage of Dig. That was super exciting at one point.
You made the homepage of Dig?
I made the Dig front page with one of my blog posts back in the day.
Oh, like you didn't make it.
No. I was
one of your posts were on it.
I got promoted. And then that same blog post was also featured on the Dig Nation podcast. So Kevin Rose.
I remember that. I used to watch that with Kevin Rose and his buddy. I can't remember the other guy's name.
I don't remember the other guy's name either. But that was like sort of one of my claims to fame in the early days of David Walsh blog. So I can totally understand what Chris is getting at with that. I'm trying to think of what other big things happened in the early days. I came into it like sort of the same thing, not with regard to money, but like Chris said, we were both in like the early print shop days, and I was just learning so much. And one of the banes of my existence was that you would find an answer to a really difficult problem on like page 15 of a forum post. And you're like, other people have to be having this problem.
Your forum post that like has the same problem that you do, and nobody responded to them. And you're just like, what did you see? Tell me what's going on. You and I have both encountered this problem. Why can't we find our solutions together?
Totally. And so I think that Chris and I come at it from that same angle as well. So that was like sort of the early day thing. I will give a bit of trivia. I don't know if Chris will remember this, but so Chris jumped off to, was it Woofoo? Was that right after the print shop thing?
Job. Yeah.
I once interviewed for Chris's job after he had left. You recommended me to your boss, and then I interviewed there.
And you didn't get it? Or you didn't want it?
I did get it, but I had found something else in the meantime. Anyways, that was my bit of trivia for the episode.
No. Oh, I have some trivia. Here's some. Here's more like a blast of the past. Can I screen share? I can I?
Yes, you can.
Be able to see it. What's the name of this show?
Oh yes, the old
Style?
Script and Style site. That
Look
was
at this. Wayback Machine.
Yes, that was
Look what
way
it says
back
here
in
on
the
the footer.
day.
Designed by Chris Coyier.
Look at that. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
A
It's
Coyier Walsh
relived again. I
production.
was so happy when you brought back the name because it's such a sweet name.
It is a sick name.
For some reason we just gave up on it because it was just kind of like a link blog, which meant that it was fun, but we just never like cracked the monetary part of it. It was probably just more work than it was worth, I guess. I can't remember why.
It is, but I'm glad that you bring this up because these are the type of sites that helped our blogs become popular, and then they just sort of went away.
We should steal that like header and footer though, and like just put our new podcast in the middle.
Look at this, using MooTools 1.2 for drag.
That's what it's about. That's what it's about. I need to get back to writing those.
You need to get back to MooTools.
Hell yeah!
Make MooTools a thing again.
We should like look at all these links. We're talking about the same stuff over and over and over and over.
Oh, we're boring. We're boring, aren't we? But no, like sites like this are at least for me, how I feel like my blog got shared a whole bunch back in the day. So Chris,
we were not the only one on the block. We didn't invent this. We hopped on this bandwagon.
Yeah, but like this whole thing was booming, right? Like you and I jumped in at the beginning days of blogs. You know, the tech blogs really gaining momentum. And another nice thing was that RSS had just gained momentum as well. So everybody was signing up for feeds. Everybody was reading blog posts.
This is the heyday of Google Reader.
It was.
And my theory is that the community was still small enough. I should stop. That it was just, it felt cool. Like it felt like, I don't know, there was, you knew everybody or at least heard of them or whatever. And it was, you could probably on the reverse side get shamed out of it if you were a bad actor. I feel like these days it's 50 times as big of a community. So there's you can't like, there's just so many bad actors these days. I mean, what has it been like on your blog? I look at old posts and see tricks and there's like 65 comments and they're all just like, awesome, I would do it this way. Oh, interesting. Here's my thoughts on this. You know, it's like blossoming conversation. And to some degree, you could say some of that was lost to Twitter or Facebook or whatever, but some of it is just toxic. It can't be all of it. Yeah, it's just the conversation in this industry. Unfortunately, we still have podcasts, little mini safe havens like this. The smaller the community, the better, but it's really been bad. The discourse sucks.
Well, I think there's something to be said about the discourse in the world right now. But so I had just mentioned a few sort of evolutionary points in my blog where I knew things had changed. At what point with CSS Tricks did you say, like, holy shit, I've got something here. This is going to be big. Like, when were you able to mentally turn that corner and recognize, like, this is big?
I don't know that it was. I mean, there probably was little moments, but I don't know that it was. I'd like to point out to people that there wasn't, you know, you don't like look at the analytics, although I just got done saying I never look at them. But of course, I occasionally look at them. If I look, because I've never taken Google Analytics off the site ever. I've had the same installation of Google Analytics since day one. You know, occasionally update the snippet just because they decide that the snippet needs to be new or whatever. But it does essentially the same thing. It's just you know, zoomed out that far, zoomed out looking at a decade. There's no bumps at all. You can't see any significant bump. It's just a slow, steady rise to today. It's super predictable. And I would like to keep it that way, really. I'd like to have it not plateau, but just stay on a steady rise. Keep investing in the site. Keep trying to do as best job as we possibly can with the site so it just slowly grows. Because growth feels safe in this industry. Growth feels like nothing's going to go away. Whereas plateau feels like, oh, we're just a breath away from that going downhill, and downhill is nobody likes that, you know. So I just mean to say that there was no moment where like X happened and I just knew we were going to be good forever. That's not to say there's no milestones, but I would say that if you're getting into blogging, don't wait for some magic moment to befall you, and if one doesn't happen, that you've failed in some way. That on the long term, there are no super big moments. In the long term, it's just slow and steady as long as you keep at it. But there was, you know, I don't know, like I remember getting like early days starting to get emails of people that want to advertise and they're willing to just PayPal you some money to put an ad up. And you're like, what? That's how this works? That seems a little janky, but okay. I think the first one I ever took money for was PSD to HTML, which is, as far as I know, still operating. You know, they probably made millions of dollars. They probably still make millions of dollars, you know? Oh, really? You can just email them a freaking PSD file and they send you back a website. It's probably easy to make fun of, but these days, as an adult now, I'm like, I don't care how you make money online. If that's a service that people need and you served it, good for you, you know? So I don't know if they advertise on the site anymore. I can barely keep track these days. That was
I've definitely seen ads for PSD to HTML around the internet.
Yeah. I mean, they were big. They were the first and the biggest, I think. And but it was weird because it's a decision-making moment. You're like, do I necessarily want to endorse this as a site owner? Like, is this the perfect target or not? I've kind of lately there's been less of that because the vibe of CS Tricks and your site too is like, learn yourself. This is for DIY people, not do it for me people. I'm not sure that the target is perfect there, but at certain scale, anything reaches some kind of target. But I think I said yes because I was like, you know what? I started this thing basically for beer money, and here's some more beer money. So thanks, I'll take it. Yes. And,
cool.
You know.
So like, what would you do differently if you could go back? Like, can you think of anything where you got it wrong and you would have changed the way that you did it, or has it been all smooth sailing?
It's mostly smooth, believe it or not. You know, I think maybe I would. I don't know. I think I've grown up a little bit, you know, like I think we're both occasionally guilty of being like, well, I need a photo. Maybe I'll just use like a hot chick for the photo. That doesn't go over as well these days. That was definitely just like a young and dumb thing. You know, I probably would not do that. Not that I got any flack for it at the time, but looking back on those posts, I'm like, I'm going to change that. That just doesn't feel right anymore. And
I still have a crush on Christina Ricci, but I've stopped using her in my my blog posts.
Yeah, it's not like I ever did bikini chicks or anything, but it was a little, slightly more tasteful. But still, it's like kind of like this is a professional environment. This is not because I think at the time I convinced myself like I'm not professional. I'm just like a dude, bro, just doing blogs. You know, I'm like it actually is professional. I'm trying to teach people web design. Regardless of how I think of it, I fit into the world in a rather professional way, and that's just the way it is. So. Anyway, that's an example. I don't regret any technology choices. I'm still very happy that I hopped on the WordPress bandwagon and don't foresee myself changing it. It's a great platform for everything I've decided to do for over a decade on CSS Tricks. I'm proud of that. I think that was awesome. Maybe I would have been a little bit more structured with been like, this is our tone. I would have tagged things better. Maybe content wise, I would have been a little cleaner than I was, but we didn't screw up. I probably would have started in Markdown, you know.
Oh my God.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm dying right. Not only do I not use Markdown, but in the early days of WordPress, the auto P function would totally hose my blog post. So I disabled it like 10 years ago. And so whenever I write a blog post now, I need to manually put the HTML. It's the worst. So Markdown is the #1 thing. So if you're starting a new blog, straight to Markdown. Straight to Markdown.
Do not screw yourself there. Although it's interesting in the land of WordPress these days, when with Gutenberg here, it's kind of like it would be tempting to just go all in on that because I don't think that and Markdown are particularly friendly. I'm not sure, but definitely don't disable auto P. That's rough. I'm sorry, man. I have that still activated, but I still have enough custom HTML. Like if I want to put a code block in my WordPress site, it's a very custom set of HTML that I choose to use that I felt was semantic and the right way to go, which basically prevents me from using Gutenberg forever, really, because I don't want to post a new code block and then I don't even know what the flow is like, but opening up old blog posts, surely it'll probably hose them just like it hosed your old blog post, whatever. Well, like, technologically, I'd be a little more careful, probably.
Cool. So on that note, with regard to like one thing that I always tell people to do is to start a blog, because for definitely myself, probably yourself as well, it changed the trajectory of not only our careers, but our life in some way, right? Because things got really cool. What advice would you give to, people new to tech about starting a blog?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always imagine it's the same as your advice. Like, definitely do it. The only reason it would hurt you is if you're a dick, and then you should get hurt. So you should start one too. I just mean, like, it's good reference for you. You have like some table stakes playground for your own self, like you won't have a website to work on. If you're ever like, oh, I never have a website. Yeah, now you do. You have your own site. So you're never at want for having a website to play around with. You can always redesign it, have fun with it. It's good that way. So it's good for web designers and developers or anybody related to this. Even if you're a social media person or something, blog about something interesting that happened to you. I don't know. There's
even social media people sometimes have thoughts of more than 160 characters. Right?
Yes, I would hope so. Or use it to start there and syndicate to social media. I don't know. It's a playground, and there's only benefit to it. And as a matter of fact, of all the hiring I've done, which isn't like a tremendous amount compared to some people in the industry, but I've hired plenty of people or been involved with hiring. It's always a benefit to me. If I can go to your personal site and it's nice and there's actual writing there, I can read and get insight into who you are and your personality and how you think and behave. Oh, that's a massive +1. Let alone if you've provided value through instructional stuff. Oh my God, that's just a massive leg up as far as hopping around jobs.
So something that I've personally struggled with a lot when I try and write is, I don't know what to call it, partially writer's block, partially imposter syndrome of I shouldn't write about this, partially just like laziness of like, nobody's going to read this thing anyway. How do you get yourself over that?
Everybody's got that. Here's one way you can get over that. Don't write anything. Don't write too much yourself. Just like, did you read an art like, oh my God, they're going to bring back Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix as a live action series? That's awesome. That should be your blog post. Post it, embed the YouTube video and be like, I can't wait for this. This is going to be awesome. That's a blog post. It's not the most interesting in the world one, but it's okay. It's your personality. You're remembering it. You're marking it in that point of time. Think of it as a link blog instead of I need to write a 1,500 word essay on how to install Docker on Linux or whatever. It doesn't have to be a tutorial. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It could just be something interesting that you did that day. It could be a photo of the lasagna you made last weekend. That'll kind of loosen up the shoulders a little bit blogging wise. If you got a couple of those under your belt, you're like, oh, this blogging thing is easy. You upload the photo, you type a few words and you hit publish, Especially when it's just your personal blog, the stakes are low. You don't have advertisers knocking down your door or whatever. it just turns into a URL. Like, don't worry about the super high quality of things. Think link blog first, and then it'll, once you're loosened up, maybe it'll be easier to write longer form stuff. That's
good. That's like an iterative approach of like, do something small and easy just to get yourself going. I like that.
I've tried to bring that back on CSS Tricks more. Even, like if I see an interesting tweet, I'm like, God, I should look into that a little bit more. I'll embed the tweet. I'll say why I thought it was interesting. I'll make a little demo that's related to it. That's a blog post. And I think those are better. I think they're more personal. They're interesting. It's a kind of blog I would want to read. So I need to retrain myself continuously those are great blog posts. Little mental insight posts are just as good as like, here's a 10-part guide to developing with Keystone JS or whatever. Like, that's great too. Maybe that has more value somehow later down the line, but it doesn't have to be the only thing that you publish.
So let's move on and talk a little bit about CodePen. So how did CodePen come about? Like, so you're blogging. There was definitely some other services at the time that allowed people to, like, kind of hack on code. Why did CodePen need to come into existence?
Well, there's a pretty direct line between blogging and it. It was kind of like I had, much like David has, I think, a kind of homegrown demo system. Kind of like, I don't know, I need to show off a demo somehow. Where do I put this thing? I want to own it wherever I put it, because I just for the longevity, and I want to have some control over this. Maybe I want to put ads on it. Maybe I want to have custom link back to the article that it's referencing. I just want to have my fingers in where this demo is. My system was really rudimentary. It was just a directory in my folder called examples. When I made a new demo, I'd make a new folder in there. I would have an index.php file. I used PHP so that I could include a header and footer in the demo. I could put analytics in there, and have a header that said, this is a demo by CSS Tricks or whatever in the header, and then made the demo and then linked to that. And that gave me a little framework for making demos. And it was fine, but what does that give you? If anybody else is viewing that demo, they still need to pop open DevTools and check it out, or view source or something. And I was like, this served me well initially, but now there's tools like JSBin and JSFiddle. These tools are amazing. Whoever the first person to think of that was, and I don't know who gets original prior art on that, should be they're back there. I would like to shake their hand. What a good idea, especially for front end stuff like this, to see the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and the output right together like that, and to make it editable and easy to get started and building. Genius idea. So CodePen certainly did not invent that, but I was like having this feeling of, I want to put my demos somewhere awesome like JSFiddle, but I don't want to give up the control. I don't want to.
What happens if JSFiddle just disappears one day?
Right. And so we didn't. Exactly. And it hasn't yet, thankfully. So it wouldn't have been the end of the world. But you never know with other companies. And people don't know that with CodePen. I'd like to promise everybody listening that we are absolutely in it for the long haul. And I am not going to close it or ruin your demos in any way. It'd be very, you'd have to pry it out of my dead hands. Like, don't worry. But at the same time, you probably should worry a little bit, just because I worry, because everybody should worry about the things that they use not existing anymore. It's just an ever-present problem on the web. So, originally we're like, maybe we'll make an open source version of it. Like, I want to build one of these sandboxes too, but by God, I think we can do it better. And so it was a slow evolution from there. And we did it so mostly in the early days, so I could host really nice demos on CSS Tricks and embed them right into blog posts. That was an early feature, because I want to be reading a blog post and see the demo right there, but not have it to be, some kind of silly iframe that I'm managing myself or something like that. So that was the original idea. But of course, immediately it blew up from there. Like, oh, what a good idea. You're getting into this too. Maybe we'll have one domain for it. We'll call it CodePen, I guess. And then that goes out and lots of people are signing up for it, making great stuff. We're like, we need to be like helping share the stuff that people are. I don't even know what people are building on this. So we built an admin screen that basically just showed us everything that people were making. And I was like, this admin screen is sweet. Let's make the homepage of CodePen, not the editor itself, but just a grid of the things that people are making. So early days of CodePen, it was just whatever anybody made was on the homepage. And then you're like, well, that's not going to scale very well because there's so much garbage, So then we implemented a little like MySQL star that you'd click it, and in the database, it would either be picked or not picked. And if it was picked, it would go into a queue and it would pop one off the queue and put it on the homepage. And it would be this rotating adventure of stuff that we handpicked as Team CodePen. That still exists today. We still handpick everything that's chosen on CodePen and showcased on the homepage. But of course, over time,
you have some content editors that do the picking for you.
Me, I mean, not just me. Marie probably does the most of it on our team, but I did all of it in the early days. And then sometimes we deputize people that are good CodePen members that are like, you do it too. If you see something you like, you click the star, and help us keep fresh, great stuff on the homepage. And it's been fun. But in the end, you can imagine how it goes from there. It's a web app. So we're just constantly thinking about features and refinements and re-architecting it and, updating things to new libraries. And now it's a massive job and is 80% of my day,
I remember I was at a conference with you when CodePen had just started, and we were at a bar having lunch, and I'll say the same thing now as I did then. I thought the reason that CodePen turned out so well and got the footing that it did is because the other likewise services, they would give you this area to, you know, do your JavaScript, your CSS, and your HTML. But CodePen seemed like the first one that featured the result, where like the result was sort of the big showcase, not the code. And I think that's one of the big reasons why CodePen blew up the way it did.
Maybe it was. That's an interesting thought. Like even when you're looking at it with the code, like the fact that CodePen was like, it was like half the screen was dedicated to the result instead of a third or a fourth or a quarter.
Yeah, it definitely starts people who are looking at it. It starts them off with what they're most interested in. It's like, here's what I'm ultimately trying to accomplish. Now here's how it was accomplished. I can totally see that. I think that's a good point, David.
And then we made some pro plans because we're like, as always, I don't try not to shy away from the word entrepreneur. You know, like if I'm going to work and spend a bunch of time on something, I need to be paid to do that. I've always been like that. You know, I try not to speak for free. I don't do nothing for them. Like it's my time. I need to be paid to do it. So early on in CodePen, we're like, how can we, what can we offer that we can charge money for? And, you know, I don't think we've perfectly nailed that yet. We're going to be working on that for a decade, I'm sure. But some of those things are like a real-time collaborative mode. You have to pay for that if you want it. So some people that need that feature, they pay for that on CodePen. Much like GitHub, if you want private things on CodePen, which can be pens or project or collections, or we have all kinds of different content. Anything, if you want anything to be private, you pay for that ability. And, you know, there's a dozen, probably, maybe even more if you count like tiny little sub features or whatever that are pro features. And if you want them, you pay for them on CodePen. And we also have a little bit of advertising and a little bit of merchandise sales. And we have a job board where we sell some jobs, but all those other things combined are probably a quarter or less of CodePen's revenue, and most of it is selling pro plans. So that's what we focus on, you know, trying to convince people that it's worth paying for pro feature. Cool. Please sign up for CodePen Pro.
What help Chris do his thing? Sign up for CodePen.
Yes.
Like at what point did you feel like it could be your main thing, where you could jump off? Did you feel like it was risky to you know, quit your job and go full in on CodePen? Or
I never had to do that. I never had to face that because I made that leap before CodePen existed. I made that leap on CSS tricks, believe me.
Oh, okay.
I was at SurveyMonkey and it was a good job. And it was, you know, it was a cool company. It was just a classic, easy developer job, you know, where everybody rolls in at 10 a.m. in their sweatpants and drinks a Red Bull and gets started for the day. You know, it was that kind of developer job. There's a lot of developer jobs like that, but that's the dream, you know. And still, I didn't hate it, but I kind of resented it because what I came from was a really small company where we moved really fast, and I felt important, and you know. I didn't have to go to work. It was remote, for one thing. All of a sudden to an expensive area of town where I didn't know as many people and I totally had a boss and I had to go to work. So even though it was this amazing, well-paying job where I was treated well with great managers and everything, I was still just like, this isn't for me. I need more control again. I need to feel like my work is more valuable to what I'm producing. So I was like, I'm going to freaking triple down on CSS tricks. I'm going to make this a business somehow, some way. You know, I'm going to be more careful about the advertising I put on there, redesign the site with more of a business attitude in mind. I'm going to start selling subscriptions to the site, see if I can get people to pay for it that way. That stuff is all gone now because it was just an attempt in the past. But I even did a Kickstarter when I quit my job. I quit my job and did a Kickstarter.
I remember that Kickstarter.
Help me do CSS tricks, you know, and it did well. But it was kind of a help me get the business started kind of thing. And then those ideas eventually faded out over time into more of just like this. It's more fun to just blog and sell ads when I can sell them.
And so that's the whole business model that enabled you to go full time. It's just ads on CSS tricks until CodePen took over.
Right, because the Kickstarter, you'd think when you see the number, I can't even remember the number. It was a lot. It was like $70,000 or something, which is insane to have the community be that behind you. But I didn't make anything off that because, believe it or not, that's super heavily taxed. So you get like half of it anyway. Then the promise was, oh, I'm going to hire a bunch of illustrators to do interesting things. I'm going to invest all that money into having people help me do this stuff. So even the shirts, you know, there's so many shirts I had to mail out. That costed a bunch of money. In the end of the Kickstarter, I probably lost money on that. But
that's a very common story I hear from people who tell me they had funded Kickstarters.
Yeah,
I haven't heard a lot of positive stories about getting funded.
Yeah, but that's the point of it, kind of. It's supposed to kickstart business later. It's not supposed to be the answer to all your prayers, and now you have that's more like GoFundMe. Like, yeah. I need $20,000. Give me $20,000. At the end of this, now I have $20,000, and I promised you nothing in a way. Kickstarter is like, I'm promising you something, and what you're doing is giving me some money to to grease the wheels. And that's kind of what it did for me. It greased the wheels. I built this thing on CS called The Lodge, which was like training videos. Instead of just me just doing a screencast on whatever the heck I felt like, I would do 20 videos in a row. You know, now now everybody and their brother does screencast series now, you know. It turned out I was almost too early to that game, I think. And then I installed some WordPress plugin that was like, if you want to have access to this area, you sign up, give me your credit card, and now you have access to this area. And that's where I hosted all the videos. I hosted them on Vimeo, where you could lock down the ability to watch the video based on domain. Mm-hmm. So the only place you could watch the videos was on my site, and you had to pay to watch them. And it was okay. It just wasn't, you know, I don't know. I don't need to spell out the demise of it, but the point of all this story was that I had taken the leap to going solo already, and was like, I'm gonna move back to Wisconsin because it was way cheaper. Because I was in the Bay Area at the time, yeah. And so that went okay. But then when CodePen came along, it was kind of like, it was just my buddies from Wufoo and SurveyMonkey that I had been working with for years and years, who I asked for help with this early version of CodePen, and immediately are like, well, this is a really cool idea. Let's flesh it out. Let's be 33, 33, 33 on the whole thing. And they were that we worked on it for a year maybe. And then at that point, they were the ones who took bigger leaps, and both of them had their own versions of softening that leap from work, you know. But it was risky for all of us to some degree, you know, more them than me, I guess. But you know, it wasn't a leap for me to start CodePen. CodePen was more of an answer to me than a leap.
And now you have, how big is your team at CodePen now?
We'll be 8, you know, and it goes up and down, you know, depending on people leaving and people starting and stuff. I'd like to be 20, you know. We're definitely that thing where we just can't. We hire as much as money we have, essentially, you know. So goal is to just keep cracking it, keep trying to find pro features that people want to pay for. And we have dreams just out the wazoo of what CodePen could do and features it could have and stuff that we just, but you know, as you know, even a team of 8 developers can only move so fast, especially on a product that's 6 years old that you need to maintain and keep operating smoothly. So I'd say most of your work is just slowly refactoring and making sure that the app is healthy, and it's a little harder to just greenfield out totally new features. We're kind of trying to do both just slowly.
What are some of the you mentioned maintenance. What are some of like the security concerns or maintenance concerns with a site like CodePen, because it's incredibly unique? I imagine the iframing is a lot of fun, but a lot of work as well.
I'd say it's significant because like any web app, there's just traditional security concerns, just like regular old XSS stuff and sanitizing inputs and just being careful that way. But then we break the cardinal rule of web apps is don't ever execute code that any people give to you on your website. Like, right. That's the number one concern is like, don't let anybody execute code. And we're like, come to our site to execute your code, which is kind of silly, but yeah, it's not that bad, just because anything that renders that's part of that input is in a sandboxed iframe on a different domain. And that solves the majority of security issues for front end stuff, But you'd be surprised how complicated it is because we also offer pre-processing. So you're like, okay, oh, you run SaaS? Oh, that means you're running a Ruby server somewhere? At the moment, we still run Ruby SaaS because it's still kind of like the canonical version of SaaS, although I think it's Dart now or something. I don't think we've gone full in on Dart SaaS just yet. But because now you're running a Ruby server and people can write SaaS and it gets processed by that Ruby server, now you need to like sandbox the crap out of that Ruby server and make sure that nobody can like break out of SaaS processing and execute arbitrary Ruby code. That would be a problem. So that type of stuff we have to think of. But a lot of that stuff was solved in the early days, and that it's not like we're re-evaluating and having to deal with major security concerns every week. Like that's not most of our maintenance. Most of our maintenance is like, wow, a lot of this site is like old jQuery stuff. And with our own handwritten state management action, like, that's a little bug prone. So some of our maintenance stuff is just like, oh my God, that somebody changed something in the HTML and it broke the DOM attaching and event handling for some click event, but we didn't catch it because there was no integration test to catch it. So like, and then we're like, well, we built some of the site in React. Like that was much more pleasant. That was it just feels more stable. It just felt like, oh my, we don't have these same type of problems. It's much more tested. It's much more robust way to build a web app. So we're kind of like, well, when we rebuild parts of the site, let's build it in React. That's just better. So a lot of the work we're doing now is kind of like, well, let's refactor some new area of the site and write it in React and test it, and let's get integration tests going. And while we're in there, maybe we'll polish up the design because we have a full-time designer now. And you can imagine what life is like. It's a slower, more adult way to build a website.
I should see if you've started reacttricks.com yet. I feel like that could be the next spin up from you.
Why do it? The only reason you do it is because you needed more. You thought you could sell ads on it for good money, and for real though, and that instead of just increasing the traffic on the site that you already have. So we publish about React stuff all the time on CSS Tricks. I don't care. I'd rather grow that than split. I feel like people split too frequently. They're like, I have a new idea. I need a new domain for it. I'm like, no, you don't. Keep the domain you got and just put more content on it.
Expand the brand.
If there was too much, like, because you can only increase the price of advertising so much too before you start to price people out, like mid-tier advertisers. Because if you're selling advertising, you kind of need to have stuff that different people can buy. That's good. So if you had a site that was just React focused, well, maybe you're attracting advertisers that want to reach specifically React people, and maybe the traffic's a little lower, so you can, there'd be you could do React tricks. Somebody could pull it off. I don't know if I want to deal with it, but
well, so let's talk about web shows and podcasting. So you've run your own show called Shop Talk for quite a while now, yeah?
Yeah.
So what were you trying to do with Shop Talk? Why did you start that?
Why did you start yours? I mean, I'll answer your question. I'm not trying to punch on it.
No, you're flipping it around on us. That's good. What Dave and I were trying to do is we were trying to have a much more personal relationship with kind of the people that we wanted to talk to, and we wanted to share some stories that we knew of from the people in our own networks about web development and the more people focused, and some stories about how things came to be. And we felt like the medium of podcasting and this web show was just so much more personal than blogs, right? It's like, it's kind of detached and people can be assholes. And
and you hope that they like you with your voice and face as much as they like your words on your site. No, that's a great reason, and I think probably feel the same way. I don't think I could articulate it that cleanly, but I think at the time it just seemed fun. It just seemed like I was a guest on other people's shows and be like, that was really fun. I have plenty to say about this. We're in this industry, a lot of us, because we like it. It's fun. And then when you get a chance to talk, it's like going to a conference, sitting at the bar with somebody, and you're just going off about, oh, Redux sucks. We moved on to Apollo. Have you seen Apollo? Yeah, you're have another Miller Lite, like that. But you just get to do it on like a Thursday.
I've been in that conversation.
Yeah. But you get to do it every week. So yes, please, and then can you apply a little entrepreneurship to it? Sure, you can. Wait for somebody to email you and say they want to put your ad in the show. And then you say yes. And then now you're making just enough money for it that it's worth it. And, and then we made like you guys make technological choices about the production of your podcast. That's so easy. If we have an idea and it takes a bunch of work, no, it's out. Do I want to have a podcast that's highly edited, where I interview 15 people, hire a reporter to go out 6 months on assignment and dig into, why was CSS regions dropped from the CSS spec? Yeah, that'd be great, but there's no model behind that. I can't quite get there. We just y'all just hit record, hit stop, send it through some light editing in our case, and ship it the next Monday. It's an hour, 2 hour a week kind of thing. It's probably the length of the show times 2, and the times 2 is emailing people and all the communication involved with booking guests. And because it's so easy, and because we make a little bit of money doing it, we're on episode 332 this week.
So today, starting this was ridiculously easy for David and I, because we just basically said, hey, YouTube, you handle this thing for us, and we don't do really anything. It was probably not quite that easy. So podcasting and web broadcasting has matured a lot in the last couple of years. What were some of the challenges that you faced getting started? This must have been harder for you than this. You do real things, right?
Oh, real things with our podcast. Yeah, we record everybody locally, and then we hired a sound person that would take those individual tracks and mix them together. So that's a little bit of a complication, but we knew podcasts at the time were only iTunes. You have an audience because YouTube exists and your blogs exist and stuff, but we're there's no alternative. We have to be on iTunes. So we figured out a way to be on iTunes, which is to have a WordPress site that you publish an article at, and then there's some plugin that alters the RSS feed that WordPress spits out to be iTunes friendly or whatever. And so now you have a URL that's the properly formatted iTunes feed, and you just, I don't know, the Apple has some kind of submission page. You go to it and drop in all the information about your podcast and wait around for a week or two, or however long it takes them for them to kind of approve you, and we got approved. And that's the only interaction I've ever had with Apple on this. And so, but now that WordPress site exists, publishing a blog post is easy. You type in the title of the blog post, you upload the MP3, whatever, and hit the button to publish it, and it just appears. It's been very little maintenance over the years. Some, but not too much. So technologically, not too bad. It's not quite as easy as just hitting Google Hangouts on air and pressing the button, but it's not that much harder.
I like how Chris makes this sound super casual while he stands in a booth that Mariah Carey just left out of. He's got the whole pro setup. It's unbelievable.
That was way later, mind you, because I also do screencasts on CSS Tricks. I have CodePen Radio, a blog post there. Sometimes I do audio spots for advertisers and stuff. So, and this was spendy, so it was kind of like a mixture of, I should probably have a really nice setup. It's been long enough and it doesn't seem to be slowing down, so it's booth time. And we got this I moved to Bend, and I have this office now. I share an office with my co-founder, Tim, at CodePen. And so there's 2 of us at CodePen, and then Craft CMS, you know them. They are here in Bend, Oregon as well. And we share the office space with them, which has been great. But it's we all have individual offices, or we share them, but there's little office pull-offs. But if I'm in a podcast, I can't just be, otherwise my coworker Tim's sitting right behind me while I'm blah, 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 blah. I started CSS Tricks in 2017. He doesn't want to listen to that 2 or 3 times a week. So,
and he'll make snide comments about it while they get picked up.
Yeah, possibly. Even overhearing somebody else's meeting is a little too much sometimes. So we're where can we go in this office? Should I should we put him on the calendar so that, you know, he can evacuate the room, or like, I don't know. And then this company is called Vocal Booth, and they're right here in Bend, Oregon. And we looked at them, we're like, oh, it's a little expensive, but it's really cool. So we just business expensed that bad boy. And now we have a booth where you can take meetings, you can record stuff like this. Great. Vocalbooth.com, not an ad.
And it looks totally pro. So you're 332 episodes in. How do you keep it fresh? How do you like make sure you're not like just doing the same thing every week?
I don't know that we are, sadly. I had a little crisis about that just the other week. I think it came out in the show a little bit. I'm like, is this even interesting anymore? I feel like we just... And I think a lot, and then we did like a survey, and we found out that people are interested still. I think it's a melting pot. You'll have your super fans. I'm sure you already have some super fans of the show that listen to every single one, and they just like your personality. They resonate with the show, and they'll listen to every one. And their lives are such that they commute or something. They have some perfect environment in which to watch it in. That's another thing that being on iTunes gives you, is that people will be listening to their car more. You know, I don't know how much people YouTube in their car, you know, but there's those, and then people leave and they come back. Like if there's a natural flow to it, like, oh, I used to listen all the time and then it just fell off because I wasn't commuting anymore, but now I'm commuting again, so I listen. And it just like CSS, I think our listenership is just really slowly, steadily risen over the years. But as far as keeping it fresh, I don't know, you get different people on. That's always a way to keep it fresh, but you change as a developer. So when you evolve and you're interested in new technologies, bring that on. And hopefully you're just like blogging, and how it could just be a link post. It could just be like, hey, did you hear what this jackass said the other day? You know, that's fresh content for a podcast. You know? That just happened. It's
David. That sounds super fun. We should do just ranty podcasts, like, oh, this son of a yeah.
Whenever the analytics go down, we'll say something terrible about someone, and that'll just prop up the whole show.
We're going to be the link bait of podcasts.
I don't know if anybody's done it yet. Done a little like, have you seen this thing I hate? Probably not maybe the right tone these days, but maybe, you know,
we'll do an hour-long podcast about one just weird trick to solve this problem.
Right? Yeah. Oh, an actual straight-up link bait? Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Todd, we'll know we'll have made it when Adobe pays us to go away.
Well, I mean, all we got to do is violate one of their trademarks, and I'm sure we'll hear from them directly.
TOS, we got this.
All right, so we are obviously still pretty new at this. You got any tips for us? Stuff we should look at for the show? How to not suck and make it to 300.
You're doing fine. You got two of you, which is clutch because you can play off each other, so that's good. You know, you should probably talk and plan as much as you can together, I would say. You know, like don't just only ever talk on the show, you know, or on the day. Just occasionally talk about what you want out of the show. It seems like you have your head on your shoulders that way. That's kind of cool. I would say even when it's a little bit tough of a week, just do it anyway. You know, like don't just miss weeks here and there and stuff. I feel like you miss 1 week and then you're like, well, that wasn't a big deal. Maybe we could miss 2 weeks over this period or whatever. Or if you're going to miss weeks, like let people know in a way. And it's almost not even as much for them, but it's for you. Be like, this was planned. We're taking 2 weeks off over Christmas because that's what we do. And we talked about it and planned it, but then we have a show and we're coming back. And I don't know, if you want to, you know, be consistent. You know, I think people respond to consistent shows. It like signals that you're serious about this thing that you're doing. It's not just
and that also spelled success for our blogs, right? I mean, in the beginning, we were posting like every single day.
You wouldn't just take a week off, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Perfect.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to kind of wrap this up. So how we typically do this is we'll go around and talk about like one key thing that each of us took away from this hour of chatting together. David, how about you go first? What did you learn today?
Going back in memory lane with Chris, you know, having like started our blogs at the same time, having, you know, both been in Madison at the beginning of our careers to do this. The one thing that I always tell every developer, whether they're new or very experienced, is start a blog. Start a blog, start a blog, start a blog. If I wouldn't have started my blog, over a decade ago, I wouldn't be at Mozilla. I wouldn't have flown around the world. I wouldn't have had this show. I wouldn't have had all of these awesome things. Like, not only did starting a blog and persisting with it change the trajectory of my career, obviously, but even my life. And so I think that Chris and I are awesome examples of how that can work out. How about you, Todd?
I really liked what Chris said about just, post a video of something you like and leave some comments on it, or start with a link blog. I frequently get into a state of like writer's block, imposter syndrome, trying to get something published because I feel like it's got to be big and perfect and all encompassing, or like be substantive, like actually contain something new to this world. And it stops me from writing things a lot of the time. Like I have
you'd be surprised how many people say that. It's not like you're unique in your trepidation or whatever to go with that. Know that that's normal and it's overcomable. And you know what? You already have a blog, so you're already ahead of it. Don't you? I think I looked at your site. You blogged about having you got a new a Surface Go, didn't you?
Yeah. I wrote a blog post.
You know why I know that?
Computer.
Because you blogged it and I read it. And it made me, it was awesome. It was very in the moment. It was very like people are less brand loyal than they used to be. And you're a living example of that with your Mac computer and your Android phone and your Surface Go tablet kind of thing. You got one of each of all the big companies. People are doing that more and more. My wife's doing that. I feel like it didn't used to be that way. I'm like Captain Apple. I'm like, what? You'd consider leaving the Apple ecosphere? Are you insane? I still have that, but now I'm starting to be old school. People are jumping ship right and left these days. But anyway, I know that about you because you wrote it in your blog, and you don't have to be as prolific of a blogger as David is. He writes more than I do these days. I just hire people to do it. It's not true. I still write. I say I write a blog post every day to this day in some way. But still, you don't have to. Your goal doesn't have to be davidwalsh.name. Blogging once a month or less is still valuable. You don't need the same kind of benefit. You don't need to be trying to make money off your blog. It could be, I want to get a good job for this, or I want to have a digital footprint of myself that exists in the world, or I want an excuse to play with the site. The goals don't have to be, I want a trajectory in which I end up speaking at conferences and working for Mozilla. It doesn't have to be that lofty. There's still benefit to it, no matter who you are.
That's awesome. I think that was my personal biggest takeaway of today. So I'll give it to you for any other thing you'd like to kind of close us up with or plug.
Yeah. Sign up for CodePen Pro. It's codepen.io/pro. It tells you all about what you get. No, I'm just kidding. But I do hope that if you haven't ever seen it or have no idea what you get from being pro on CodePen, check it out. Maybe it will resonate with you in some way. It's not the same as having a personal site, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have profiles on sites like CodePen so that people can find you if you're looking for work and see examples of what you do and get a sense of your personality and skills and abilities and taste and all that stuff. And CodePen fills that role for a lot of people, and it's kind of cool in that way. And if you want to, for example, work on like little private things to keep to yourself, well, that's a reason to be pro then, because it's not terribly expensive. And then you can save private stuff, so it's not, people aren't seeing your little works in progress, And
that CodePen lets you blog too, right?
It does. There's a blogging feature on CodePen.
There you go.
You don't have to use it for everything, or you could syndicate it to both places. The idea was like we wanted to give people a quick place. Obviously, there's some success with stuff like Medium, where it's like I don't have to, or WordPress.com or anything. I don't have to do any work. I just type in the blog post and I get a URL for it. I think that's great, and I think that's the right answer for a ton of people. For developers like us and that we talk to, sometimes it's kind of nice to actually have a real website of your own, so that there's you're taking care of it and learning, growing up as a developer in that way. But it doesn't mean you can't post it both places. I mean, I think one of the big reasons people post on Medium isn't necessarily because it's easy. It's because it's part of this ecosystem of writing, and you get to look at your claps and you get to some feedback, and there's commenting system built in and all that stuff. But people often do both. You can write on your own site and throw it on Medium if you want to, or throw it on CodePen as well, because now you're part of this ecosystem of posts. on CodePen, and it will get you more people reading it. Assume you want people reading what you write. It doesn't hurt to publish it there as well. And so some people use it or don't. It doesn't matter.
So check out CodePen.io, sign up for a pro plan, support Chris and the things that they're doing, and
there you go.
Get started blogging with, sharing your code samples today. I think that's a great place to close
Thanks
that
for
up.
The marketing. Well marketed.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show and chatting with us today. I think it's been a great show. We will be back next Thursday with another guest. My friend Lemon will be joining us. Lemon hosts a podcast of his own called The F+, where he reads terrible things on the internet. Lemon also produces a bunch of really amazing online games like idiots.win, damn.dog, party.party, and all kinds of other cool things. He's going to talk about why we should just build stupid things for fun and art and all the things you can learn about that. I think that's going to be a great show. So until next Thursday, thank you so much for watching. My name is Todd Gardner from Track.js JavaScript Error Monitoring, and my co-host David, writer of davidwalsh.name.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
Hey.